Hi, welcome back. Now, in our lesson on contracting systems, we said that a contracting system does three things. It gives us the requirements of a valid contract. It provides rules for the performance of that contract. And it also will provide remedies in the event one of the parties fails to perform according to the terms of the contract. And in many ways, it's this third requirement, remedies, that is most important. Why do I say that? Because remedies are what give the contract meaning. Meaning, it's one thing to say, you must do this, you must tender conforming goods, but we must have a remedy in the event you fail to tender conforming goods. And if I don't have that remedy, then the obligation to deliver conforming goods is meaningless, right? So we have to have the remedy to give to the contract meaning. Now, the UCC defines what constitutes a failure to perform. And we said that a failure to perform is called breach. Whenever you hear about breach of contract, what you should know, what you should hear when you see that is that one of the parties has failed to perform. They have failed to perform their obligations under the contract. And in the last lecture, we looked at what are the obligations of a buyer and a seller. Now, the UCC provides remedies for the breach of sales contracts. Again, the parties can always control remedies within the terms of their contract. But if they don't, the UCC will provide rules for what happens in the event of a breach. And remedies in the UCC resemble those of the common law. So any study you did about remedies in your introductory business law class is going to be relevant to this. Now, here's what you need to remember about contractual remedies. Contract remedies are designed to place the non-breaching party in the same position it would have been in had the contract been performed. So our remedies are going to be based on the notion, where would the non-breaching party be had the breaching party performed according to the terms of the contract? And by the way, we will use the terms breaching party and non-breaching party instead of innocent party or guilty party. The reason being that contract remedies have nothing to do with the reasons for the breach. Contract remedies should stay the same if there was a good reason for the breach or if there was a bad reason for the breach. And why is that? Because they are designed to satisfy the party's expectations under the contract. So those expectations will determine the scope of the breach. There's no such thing as punitive damages for a breach of a contract. This is why, incidentally, it's so important that we know what contracting system applies, because if the contracting system is the UCC, then there are no options for punitive damages, punishment damages. If in fact it's according to the common law, there may be an option for punitive damages. So in this lecture, we're going to look at breach of a contract and the remedies available to both the buyer and the seller. And so after the lecture, you should be able to answer these questions. What constitutes a breach of a sales contract? What money damages are available for breach? What is resale? What is cover? What is specific performance of the contract as a remedy? And finally, what are liquidated damages? The UCC shares the same remedies principles with the common law, starting with the notion that the parties are to be placed in the same position as they would have been in had the contract been fully performed. Breach exists when one party to the contract has failed to perform its obligations under the contract. The UCC provides relief to the non-breaching party so long as they acted in good faith and sustained damages through no fault of their own. Remedies are judicial actions. They are the things that a judge or an arbitrator do that are meant to compensate an injured party in a civil lawsuit. And remedies are made up of either monetary damages, money damages, or what we call equitable damages, which is to say a party must do or not do something. Now, the goal of contract remedies is to give to the parties the benefit of the bargain they struck. What is it that you expected to receive out of the contract? Contract law is meant to put the parties into the position they would have been in but for the breach. And as I mentioned, intent is not important in determining remedies for breach. Did the party intend to breach the contract? Did the party negligently breach the contract? It shouldn't matter. In fact, the efficient breach theory states that sometimes a party should be allowed to breach a contract and to pay damages if doing so would be more economically efficient than performance under the contract. Sellers tend to breach in a rising market. As prices are going up, a seller may breach a contract in the belief that it can afford to pay the damages because eventually the goods are going to be much more valuable. Similarly, buyers breach in a falling market. A buyer will breach an obligation if it is aware that it's going to make money, it's going to be more economically efficient to breach the contract, pay damages, and then to later buy the goods at the lower price. So contract remedies is meant to give the parties the benefit of the bargain they struck. You as a business manager should not be afraid to breach a contract if you believe that it is more economically efficient to breach than to perform. It should not make a difference on remedies. Now there's a duty of mitigation, and what this means is that in any contract, the non-breaching party must limit its damages. It must attempt to reduce its damages as much as possible. Both buyer and seller have a duty to mitigate in case of a breach. We have different words for those. In the event of a seller breach, a buyer must attempt to purchase substitute goods, what we call cover. Meaning, if the goods are not delivered, the buyer cannot simply lay back and sue the seller without making an attempt to go purchase substitute goods. Because the remedy is going to be the difference between the contract price and what the market price of the substitute goods is. So duty of mitigation exists on the part of the buyer. Duty of mitigation also exists on the part of the seller. In the event the buyer breaches, a seller must attempt to resell the goods. And we call that resale. A seller must attempt to put the goods on the market. Now, the market price may not match what the contract price was. It probably is going to be lower. And again, the remedy is going to be the difference between the contract price, what it was supposed to receive, and the market price, which it actually received. So if we have a seller attempting to sell footballs to a third party, to a buyer, the buyer who fails to take delivery of the football, the buyer fails to take delivery of the footballs, the seller must then go try to sell those footballs somewhere else. Even if it is going to do so at a lower price, because then this remedy is going to be based on the difference between what the contract price was, what the buyer was supposed to pay, versus what they actually recovered in the resale of the goods.